Now take a stance in this preparation for upper body work. So you're standing anywhere into your space near your props. You could stand with a wall behind you. That could be kind of an interesting support for some of these beginning patterns. I'm going to be a little bit mid-space so my arms can swing to the sides. But I want you to have your belt so it's hanging around your shoulder piece, your whole kind of shoulder matrix. And we're going to have the feet so that the blend of reaction in the knees is to motion them forwards and feel where the weight slants to the front, the center, the back of your feet, and then reach your arms forward so you're actually letting your rear just rest down into its kind of haunches. Interlace your fingers deeply at the roots and then push the palms forward, but feel how the wave motion of the back is created when you hollow through the midsection, not just the belly, but all the way up right into the heart. And then we're going to lift up with the arms and relate to that reach with the ribs. Feel the knees bending. Feel maybe if there's a tiny turning in of the toes. And then you're going to lean to your left side and get that sense of directional motion through the rib cage. So feel ribs, arms. The uncertainty of where the brain should be is probably settling in immediately. So you might turn your head to look down towards your left side, or you might enjoy keeping that slight lift up. Now, as you switch sides, work with that lift of the ribs, the center of the skull on top of the spine, and lean to the other side and feeling the groundedness of the feet of your structure and the motionary quality of the breathing in your side. The kind of the slants of the sides of the body trying to work their way towards peeking open. And then as you come back and center, we'll take the hands down to get the belt. And as we bring the hands to hold the belt wide, as comfortable for your arm muscles, holding that over and up towards the sky. Feel that reach of the chest muscles and start to move your arms back. So when you move them back, you might feel that arch transition into your stomach area, your low back. So I want you to try to keep the pressure down into your feet. Move your arms back, right? And so as the arms reach back, we lean towards the left side again. And the feeling differences are slight. I feel like my spine has a little bit more certainty when I have the belt compared to holding just the hands. There's a little bit more spine strength. And as you come back in center, preparing to move to the other side, give yourself a lot of free play here to go side to side for a few moments at your own pace. Feel when you lean that the legs could be together. They could be stepping a little bit apart. You might gain some support with the legs in either of those variations for your arms to move up out of the roots of the body. Okay, last time when you come back up, feel the hold of that belt and slide the hands out very, very wide. So wide that it's generous enough that you can move your belt behind you and then grab a hold of that belt with the hands facing towards the front. So my hands grip the belt, grasping on, arms reaching back with the shoulders and the chest moving back. Be here for a moment where the special focus is this opening of the chest, right? Really the upper beam of the ribs here, upper beam. Okay, step the feet out wide. You might need to kind of change your stance and your placement of the room. And then as I lean forward, I have a generous width with my hands on the belt. But I'm using this belt to kind of cruise into my upper back. And as I lower down my brain's weight, as you let the spine lift and then lower down, you're going to let the back of the legs get the deepest stretch. So head down. And as you're here, I want your head to be so it's in a place where you can feel gravity flowing through the circulation of the spine, the muscles along the spine. And then, of course, there is feelings of leg muscles, of arm muscles. And I'm not sure if that's your main field of concentration, but I certainly notice that my mind is sensing my extremities stretching, my legs, my arms. But that whole pillar of the spine into the brain is like it's a different sensation, right? It's more of an energy direction of inverting the body, head towards the earth. Head below the heart would be the key. Nod your head a little side to side. Now finally, see if you can move the belt a little bit farther over behind you, stretching through those arms and shoulders. And then right here where you're at, you're going to let go of the belt and bring your hands so that they hold the legs, and bring the legs a little closer together so you really can feel some emphasis of grounding and support. We're going to take an Uttanasana, which is a simple standing forward bend. And I would encourage you to kind of walk on over to your bolster so that it is in front of you. And when your feet are in that hips distancing path, you're going to feel where your hips lift up behind you. And then you can lower down, holding onto your elbows and letting the weight of your head center off of the spine's peak. Kind of thinking that the peak of your spine is your brain. And with the brain peak dropping down, getting a nice kind of warm stretch in your back. You might kind of wag your tail, feel the arms waver side to side, but where you grip onto your elbows, yep, your arm direction moving down continues to open up and flush out of the back. So I'm hoping that we can warm the spine up a little bit this way, and then we'll take it in all its directions and get as much hydration through the joints along the spine and open the chest deeply. Okay, now with a few more moments, you can either separate from holding your elbows. You can also bring your hands to your bolster if that's in reach, and that might feel kind of settling to you as you prepare to come down to sitting. So here's where we might approach this, because moving from down, this place of head down, is easiest to actually get to the floor here versus popping our brain back up. So you can either pivot and then take a seat on your bolster, or you can wander on down a different way to get to the floor if you have a chair nearby. And then you're going to take your hips. I'll change the angle in just a second, but I want you to first just kind of land here. You're sitting in front of your bolster. We're going to take a horizontal chest opener, more of a mounted rook pose. And so you'll need your sand, you'll need your belt, you'll need a block. And most importantly, you need to assess where you're at with your spine flexibility. So lower your head down to your blankets. And then here is where you're going to decide, with the arch of the spine, do you need another block? Well, actually, do you need a block under the back of your pelvis? And then the sand across your ribs. Arms are opening out. They're not on top of the blankets. This is important. So they're right in front of the blankets, and they're basically between the blankets and bolster. Now, if you decide you don't need or want the block, it's going to be a much more intense stretch in the stomach, and the rib cage flares. So take a few moments to assess if you want to block under your pelvis or not. And then we add the sand to the ribs, and we keep the arms open, and you be the decider if your legs are going to stretch down, right? They can stretch down. They can also stay bending. My preference is to scoot my feet out a little wider, turn the toes in, and rest the knees together. And of course, your spine will gradually warm up. It might take a few moments, but feel where that natural arch is through the rib cage. Okay, so get a feel, where does the directional balance here move into your chest? And those that have the desire to go without the sand on the ribs, you might use your belt instead and hold on to that belt overhead and open the chest with the awareness that the arms are not pushing into the blanket. So if they are coming back up on the blankets, bring the belt a little bit wider. Okay, let's land here with the feel of the breath in motion, belly, ribs, and chest. Letting your feet be where they're comfortable. Maybe the knees are bending, but you've decided to let the legs turn in together, the knees towards touching. If you flow both thighs straight down to reach into a straighter leg position, it's kind of interesting to get the feel of this momentum of kind of the rocking of the ribs, where if I hold my belt, which you might be able to do with your sand on as well, you feel a lot of dense awareness in your chest muscles, and you might find that the spine starts to loosen up and accepts the deep back bend, the front of the spine strengthening. And let the eyes center in, and let's take a few moments simply with the attention of the balance of the breathing muscles, and feel the lateral movement of your ribs. Belly expands and relaxes. Now separating the grip of the hands from any object that they could be holding on to. Feel where the elbows are releasing to the ground. And part of getting the bones to release, if you can feel where the chest walls are moving outwards, and give your body a little bit of patience to get there, because it's not that direction during the day very often. So it might take some time to get that tension to dissolve in the frontal plane. Now with the belly motioning on the in-breath, if your legs are straight-ish, you're going to start to guide the knees to bending, the feet feel the flooring. And then sand gets kind of shifted aside if it's on. And we're going to go into our side sage pose. And since you're solo, right, you don't have prop assistant or sandbag assistant, You might get a little bit curious about how the knees kind of waver side to side before you get into that left hip. We'll go left first. So we're going to let the upper back be completely connected to the bolster, right? The back space where the shoulder blades span. Okay, and now we'll take the right arm up and we're going to roll to the left and feel how you can kind of already get kind of close and smoosh into that bolster with the ribs. But I like to use my right hand, kind of lift and then set on my ribs back down and really feel this. You don't have to lift up entirely like this, but you can feel this whole side layer of your ribs. You know, when we were standing, we were leaning to the side, that kind of repetition we did. This is like that direction, but we're getting a little bit more settlement into the rib structure. So you want to feel that you're almost pivoting a little bit back in the assessment period before you start getting all your props on, okay? So I'm going to use a ball on the inside of the right leg. You might use a block. And with that left leg bending, you're certainly going to descend again, but possibly have a sand on the side and feel where that layer of circulation is with that right arm, possibly a block overhead. Something else that is used under the upper hand on this pose would be like a stool or a chair, like a really short chair. And you might be surprised at the props you can find that are valuable in a home. So, toilet paper roll. Now, maybe a paper towel roll would be better, but it has to be pretty dense, huh? So when you have support under your right hand, whether it's a block or another house feature, you want to find where the ribs feel like there is continuous movement with each breath. And that can be the only focus that you acquire in this shape, is that slow inhalation. Feel how you can patiently manage the circulation of oxygen and enjoy resting your facial muscles in this very brief time in the whole scheme of the day. It might be helpful to just let yourself slow it down, regenerate a bit. It's the new gen, it's the regen. And where the hip is moving on that right side that's open, it might feel like you're rotating back a little bit with your ribs touching onto the bolster. So do what feels safe for your neck. If it doesn't feel good to be rolling on the back of your head a little bit, then stay down to the left side of your skull. Now with weight into that left hip, reach to the right side. Okay, and we're all very experienced with the sequencing patterns. So what we're going to work through from this side position is actually into a reclining cobbler's pose. So kind of acquire awareness of your hips and your legs, and then feel if you can let those attachments or where it attaches to kind of huddle into the center. So I'm going to guide my right knee to my left knee. So it's kind of a fetal position. And my sand is a little bit of a nuisance, so I'll move it aside temporarily. And as you rotate into your bolster, you're going to slide the left arm through to help yourself up. And let's take our belt. Okay, let's take our blocks in the front and then turn your bolster to flip it so it's straight back behind you. So it's more in that vertical path. It's straight back, lifted up on the blankets. and then pivot to your bolster's edge with your sacrum, okay? And take a couple blocks below each leg, you've got a block. And as you place your belt, you're going to use it pretty firmly around your back and your feet. So you're going to place the buckled up belt overhead. It's in whatever loop it happens to be. It could be short, it could be already wide, but you'll find out when you get there. So as you buckle up, place it so it reaches over the tops of your feet. You're going to bring the belt over the top of the ankles. And then when you weave it back, you might halt for a moment and kind of feel where that belt is at the very base of your ribs. You're not going to lower down with the belt there, but feel where the breath is at that space. You know, take a couple breath focus points and then gather the belt so it's very low. It's almost like you're trying to sit on it, but you can't quite get it under your tush. So the tush is in a block spot. So it's at the kind of the eyebrows of the buttocks, maybe a little lower. It's up to you. I want to feel my legs be pressed on by the belt. So there's some impression. Now, the tightness of the belt is probably going to be good for the knee space, but probably means we're all a little different at our response. So I'm going to lift up my blocks so they're contoured under my thighs. So I especially pivot them so it's a little bit easier. And when I lower back, I can have my sand on my feet. If this is a real tight belt for you and you're okay with it, make sure the buckle is near your hip. So when it's time to shift, you can easily have the buckle there for your hand. And you can put your sand on your feet. If you have 2 sandbags, you put 1 on each thigh. If you've got 1 sandbag and you don't want it on your feet, you can put it across your ribs. It's up to you. Now, those that have that extra ball are going to place it nearby, and you're going to hold on, interlacing your fingers at the back of the skull. And when you hold on to your head with your hands, can you move your elbows wide and feel where the weight of your head is leaning back and there's very little chin lifting? Okay, so I want you to maintain, so there's length at the base of the neck, and it's not a damaging length where you're pushing your chin down to your chest, but you find a nice settling, and then separate the hands and feel each side of the skull supported. I suppose there could be an argument for having a blanket under your head on this one. You know, you could have one on top and one on the bottom. So if you need another height right now, you could add a towel or a blanket right here under your skull. As long as you feel that your head is centered and your chin is not pushing up, that's the key. So you don't want to have this chin jutting upwards. Arms are spreading back in the air. And as you reach your hands to interlace at the roots of the fingers, turn the palms back and try to let the hands stretch a bit. This doesn't mean you are limiting your shoulder intensity. I don't want you to overdo the shoulders on this one. So it's likely going to be elbows bending, trying to turn the hands inside out. You don't do that very often as a daily habit. I'm going to turn my hands inside out for a while. And then as you get a feel of your arms moving back, relax the hands on the floor, open out your palms, and get the arms as far out as they'll go. We'll call this one Far Out Asana, at least for the arm zone. And then with the centerpiece, easily guided by breathing and relaxation. And is it okay with you to surrender and to relax and restore the nervous system? Do a little bit of a check-in. Even at this point in the session, where does the awareness integrate into letting go and feeling your body in a very useful amount of spaciousness for the inner environment. Now bring the arms so that there's all rest in the arms. There's no stress of extra stretching in the shoulders. But understand that a lot of the arm work that we repeat is about circulation and hydration in the shoulder tissue. So it's important to recognize that repetition in the class, even though they're very simple movements, they're important. Okay, so with the in-breath for a count of 4 to 5, feel the belly expand. And on the out-breath, you'll experience the diaphragm naturally shifting and lowering down the abdomen. So it's all a natural diaphragmatic breath, abdominal breath experience, right? With the diaphragm essentially moving with this pattern of inhale, abdomen expand, exhale, it descends. So the yogic breathing might be different than your daily habit. Your daily habit could be inhale, belly pulls in, opposite of this. So try to breathe with a diaphragmatic glide. See if you can work with that anytime. So we're going to shift to that side. Actually, we'll do 2 hip stretches first. So I won't get ahead of myself. It's easy to unbuckle. And as I move the belt away, just off of my legs, I'm going to bring my knees to point up. I like to keep the sand on for as long as I can, accept it. If it starts to get a little irritating, I just take it off. It's no big deal. You might like it. It might be grounding and it might not be. So find what works for you. And then as the legs are no longer dependent on the feet together, you're going to lift the right foot, cross that right foot to the left knee, and then use the ball or a block on the outer left hip. So I've placed the ball so it's right at the very top of the outer left thigh, greater trochanter. And then I'm going to actually kind of push it into my leg so it's stuck. And that could be the block as well, or a towel. And you're going to lean your body weight into that ball and hold on to the right knee or just below the right knee with the left hand, and find some purpose in that circulation to the right hip. It's nice to access it in a really safe zone. You don't have to have your sand on. You could certainly have taken it off long ago. The right arm is either resting or it's stretching back besides your head. And if resting, it feels the most accessible for your nervous system to calm down, stay with that. And I want you to switch sides. So as you uncross and then change the left foot up to the right leg, kind of feel how as the ball or block is set to the right hip, you're going to lean your body weight into that ball or block and get the hip so that the center of the back of the pelvis it's still pretty much in one state, but you're stretching into your left hip by getting your right hand to hold the left leg and pull a little towards you. Feel that exterior left hip deeply. The left arm could stretch back or be by your side. want you to get a fairly decent hip awareness here, even though we're going to go quite a bit deeper into the hip soon. But get a feeling of circulation at the top of your thigh. And then let's let go. And we're going to go right to side sage with that direction of moving the ball or the block. Uncross left foot. And then roll to your right hip. Take the sand completely off. And then turn your bolster. Okay. So it's going to pivot just as your arm will in between. And you might put a ball on the inside of the left leg. And when you lean in, can you work with the, this is kind of an interesting way. When you are kind of leaning to your right side of your waist on the bolster, you can reach back to the bolster with your left hand. And if you have a little bit of a handle on the side of the bolster, it's very cool. And then you're going to lean down into that right rib spatially. There's many ribs you're leaning into. It's not just one. And maybe put some sand to your exterior or the hip. And as that left arm flows over, it might be essential that you have a block overhead. Orient your hips to what is featured internally, that you can sense the circulation in your organs, in the structure. And as the hips have that landing, there is a piece of that left side that is vulnerable to the stretch, right into that hip. So I like the sand sometimes on the hip, but most of us will place it higher up, it seems, on this pose to the rib cage. Up to you, right? It just kind of depends on as you land in your body. By the time the class is up, you will have landed in your body. What feels kind of achy or deprived of circulation, that's where you want to kind of lead your sand to. Even though the sand on the body doesn't necessarily feel that's the area that's stretching, like right now, I don't really feel my ribs getting the deeper stretch. It's my left thigh, quadricep, hip flexor, psoas, and then we're all different, right? Some of us might feel the shoulder, the chest, the back. So give yourself a few more moments here, and your spine is starting to get some play of the interchange of heat from the movement of the ribs and the breath, starting to warm up the front of the spine and actually strengthen into the back. And I'll try to keep the dialogue going, so we are continuing to go into some back strengtheners and core lengthening, right, when you do back strength. If you can line up a nice breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let the belly comfortably move with the breath. And now when we do come out, we are going to go kind of completely to the front body. So you'll want to kind of prep your hips here for some gliding down and towards that right side. So I'm at my sand on, I'm going to move it away first off this time. And then as the left thigh guides to the right, yes, that's right. And then you're going to let your body, you're rolling into your ribs. Okay, so I want us to encourage when we roll and we come around to table that we're going to be with our knees separating enough, and take your bolster, put it onto the side, and turn your blanket stack. So it's 2 blankies, and the blankets are going to be kind of directly when you're in this position of hands and knees. It's right under your core body. It's a little bit under my my front of my hips too. You can change it as time goes on. I'm going to be a little bit more onto the back of my, not onto, more towards my shin than the front of the knee personally, but you might have different ways of placing your weight into your legs. But let's feel where our hands are wide on the mat and articulate your spine and your stomach in cat-cow. Really take the time to feel that. So when you round your back into cat, feel the spine. I don't know if you can feel your actual spine moving, but you'll feel the connective tissue along the sides and feel where your head relaxes. Okay. Now, when you arch your back, you're going to gradually move your ribs forwards and your hips back and massage the movement in your spine and your hips now. So feel the movement ritual of rounding and arching, and play with the dip of the chest and that movement of the hips as you push the pelvis a little forwards to cat pose. Right? This is all a hands and knees pattern, so it's not that we're pushing our hips to the blanket yet. Okay, now as you articulate that movement of your spine, I want you to hook your toes under and then lift your knees up, and you're kind of in puppy pose. And you'll lift up your knees and stretch your heels downwards and your head towards the blankets. Okay, monitor the nervous system on this one. Yeah, it's certainly a little bit of a mystery at how this could be a calming pattern besides the fact that the head is downwards. So I want you to move forward to more of an upright push-up pattern, and you'll scoot your feet back and then you'll lower your thighs down, the front of the thighs on the blankets, the tops of the feet resting, and then lower your belly down onto the blankets and keep this arch spine. Okay, so you're starting to work your way into cobra. Cobras don't have limbs, right? So we're working with that core cobra. So with the hands feeling that openness, you're going to guide your elbows back and then rest the ribs all the way up to the top of the ribs, which you're going to feel where your chest is. And I want you to bring your hands so that they actually stretch forwards, like kind of past mat space at this point. No wider than your mat, so maybe a little bit more narrow. And then as you're here, I want you to let your hands press down, bend your elbows slightly and lift the right leg up and monitor that the waistband is centered. And maybe you're looking forward between your thumbs. That's a good spatial direction. Okay, lower that right foot and change to the other foot. And as you get a feel for that lift of the back leg, it's nice to only have two legs to do this core, posterior core strengthener. It's fairly focused. Lower down and feel where the tops of the legs are guided as you slide one hand at a time in underneath. It seems like they're under your shoulders, but they're likely farther back. And you're going to push to come into a pretty easygoing upward facing dog. You've got the blankets, and the blankets are a little more crushable than a bolster. So your up dog is gradually more intense on this one. Okay, so lengthen through the front, lower back down, and I want you to lower your hands in front so you make a pillow for your forehead. If you don't like this pillow, you can maybe use your block, you could use a towel, you could grab a hold of your sandbag and put your forehead on that too. But I want you to place the knees a little bit wider, kind of like you had in a reclining cobblers. Remember, you have your feet turned in together, your knees turned out. So you move your knees apart, and most people call this frog pose. But we're not going to pull the knees up at all. We're just going to be, the pivoting power is at the foot, not the knee, not so much the knee. So feel the inside line of your foot from the big toe to the inner heel line, touching down. If it's slightly broken at how much is touching, just notice that. That's important to notice your flexibility in your foot. And maybe try to stretch the toes a little bit. So if you're really confused what we're up to, what you have is between, when you're still flat on your blanket, you're turning your foot out, right? You're not pivoting so harshly on the knee, but get a feel. I don't want you to pull your knee all the way up like the full frog, but you're pivoting out and circulating in your hip. Give it a couple more seconds here. Try to get a feel for that rotation. Now, as we bring our head up, maybe you don't turn your head like so, but coming on up, we're going to bring the hands to slide back. And now, child's pose. You can feel the legs help out this way. This is almost an interesting guide. I'm going to pivot the tops of the feet so that my toes hook under so I can get some direction back. When I come up dog and then come back to child, I want you to come back to that knee, turn out, the toes together, and then lower your head down to your blankets. You can scoot the blankets forward, sit back towards your heels. If this is way too much in your knees, then you're not going to approach it this way. What you might take is your hands forward, your hips a little bit higher, and you might put a block between your feet and see if you can sit back onto that block. That's another option. You can also use your bolster on the top of your calves too. Most of us will adapt for the moments that we're here to get the back wave stretching. And those of you that want to stay in child that are really comfortable with it, you stay. And those that want to come up instead are going to come up, toes under, knees up, downward dog. Take dog pose or child's pose, your choice, but stretch the back of the lower legs if you're in dog pose. Keep the heels pumping towards the floor. Let the arms have that full stretch sensation. Those of us that have remained in child's pose are focusing on the back surface of the ribs, opening with each breath. So take a few more and feel where that circulation is defined in your back body. Good. Take another inhalation through the ribs in the back. Okay, gradually you're going to lower and we'll all meet on our bolsters. So I want you to take a moment as you come up to table, and then you'll bring your knees back in line. And I like the block between my feet. This is pretty specific for the hip. And we'll just pivot the bolster behind us, or sorry, the blankets behind us. This is going to be behind you. Like I mentioned, we're going to meet on the bolster. So I want you to take a simple seat, pivot your way around. Then we kind of turn all over the place in these home practice classes. There seems to be a little more free play in the sequencing for some reason. So we'll take a seat, and I want you to put your blocks nearby. You're going to want all your goodies. But we'll take the left foot in front of the right knee. So you're in a simple cross-legged position. And the right knee is trying to go down to the floor. Okay, now if my knee doesn't go down, if it doesn't go down, doesn't touch, I want to have either a block if it's pretty high, or I can put a blanket under my leg. So my leg, I can try to push down, but I have to use kind of the energy to push. So it might be nice for me to have something under it that has a squishability like a ball, or I could use a blanket. So if you don't want that, that's okay, but it's a temporary setup for the knee. Take 2 blocks, feel your seat on the bolster, and move your blocks over to the right side and add your sand on that left side to start. Okay, so I've got my rib cage with its direction. If I can put my hands around the sides of the ribs, I can kind of feel its turn. I know some of you are getting right to it, but get a feel how this rib turns, and then you spill over to your blocks. Take the blocks farther over to the top right corner. So it's about 1 to 2 o'clock on the right side. You know, I feel on this one that I could use something in my left leg as well. So if it's getting a little bit concerning on your left leg, you can always add something. If it's too high up and it doesn't hurt you, you can keep it where it's at. Now blocks go forwards. You still have the same leg definition. A few more moments. Okay, now we're going to take this into a full twist. So we're going to move the blocks out to the sides and then lower down the right leg by using a sandbag onto the right thigh. That's part of its guise, is to press down and ground. Now, as I pivot to my left, I'm going to twist to the left, right hand onto that left leg. Now, you might find that you can cross your leg over your right leg and actually kind of stomp your left foot on the floor. I guess stomp is a little bit of an active description of that not happening. Okay, but when you push down into your left foot, can you hook that right elbow to the left leg and then dial in the twist to your left? So feel where that rotation is through the upper back. This all kind of comes back to how we started with some of the arm movements. Now we're getting into the relationship of the practice. So feel, if you do not cross your leg over your left leg, then you certainly might find some help with a block in front of your core. Step onto the block or pivot the left leg with a foot on the block and then take the twist. This might be better for some of us with our knees or our hip opening. Okay, so with a few moments, can you use the tug of the breath, the intra-abdominal pressure of the twist? Feel where your brain is comfortable atop the spine. So if it's turning and that feels safe for your shoulders, then go with it. You might keep it as gradually rotating as possible. Just keep it simple. Rest your eyes back into the brain. Good. Now as you unwind, you can go kind of quickly out. Let's take a Supta Baddha, actually not Supta, we'll take Baddha Konasana. So feet together. And then when I have the feet together, the knees out, I'll put my sand across my feet right up where the ankles are broadening out. And then kind of feel what that's like in my knees, notice. Work on the upright spine process versus reclining or going forward and rounding. And then can you get your block and place the block wide, hands holding, stretch up the arms. And when you're holding that block wide, you're going to bend your elbows and your hands move back. And feel it as a kind bend versus really trying to force your elbows together. I want you to try to work with lifting up the kind of the strip of tissues from the armpit and then all the way through the back of the elbow to the really up to the elbow tip. So the muscle through the back, the tricep. And as you lift your arms straight up, can you lift up and work your ribs to center back? You might feel like when you try to move your ribs back, you round your back or you're going to fall. But I think the sandbag should hold you down. You can always scoot your feet farther forward. If it's bothering your knees, scoot your feet farther in front of you and see if that's a little more soft in the connective tissue. And then I bend the elbows, and I'm going to eventually try to get my elbows a little closer together so I have an helmet versus letting them really kind of spaz out. So with a few more lifts and lowers, Try your effort here at lifting up the arms. Hold the block, feel the palms push in, define the shoulders, and then bring your arms forwards and set the block anywhere, okay? Take the left foot, tuck it into the bolster, place the sand onto that right thigh, blocks to the left, and come in to this hip opener. And as I mentioned, we're going to do a series of them once we get on our back. So let this be kind of the challenging, perhaps, part of the hip work. My knees are kind of pulling up a bit on this one, so I could put something under. I could stuff a towel in or a blanket or the ball. But for me right now, they're so far up that I don't think I would want to be pushing them down into something. I want them to just flow out from the hip. So there's a reason for a prop under the legs if the legs will kind of go to the prop. But otherwise, if I put something under and my leg wants to go away from the prop, it's going to kind of actually challenge my back and maybe feel a little bit tighter in my back. So you might need to kind of play with these props and see if a prop is feeling good under you. You know, it's kind of up to you. I mean, some people would probably likely do this without the bolster under the seat. So this does make it a tiny bit more challenging because we're dropping down into the legs here. Okay, let your spine approach the leg versus the leg approach the spine. Like the leg trying to pull up to the body. And then scoot the blocks to the front. You give yourself the time that you need in each of these directions, to the left and then back to the center. And then coming into that space, noticing if you are a fairly confident, centered poser. If this just feels natural for you to be in this angle, as we come up, blocks out, sand to left leg, maybe come into it rather smooth. So my left thigh lowers down. And I want to have that right foot so it is in front of the left knee. It's kind of in front of the shin spatially. And, you know, if it is difficult for you to put the foot on the other side of the leg, like this for your spinal twist, instead of causing that pressure, you're going to probably put your foot on a block. Okay, so it is really a nice option sometimes to have this block, whether my foot is stepped on it or the foot is turning out on it. Okay, so when you do this rotation, hook the elbow and feel the back open, and then feel the twist through the back muscles, the core, and you might feel like it's a shifting plate, right, in your back. It's kind of interesting. We want the sacrum, the base of the spine, to feel like it's not getting a lot of play here. The place that's getting the most place is the ribs, because the thoracic vertebral column does this work, right? It rotates. It's our rotator. It rotates, it moves the heart, the lungs as well. So as you turn to your right, the more you kind of discipline your mind that way, like, yeah, it's okay to turn. I can rotate, and you might actually find the psychology helps the physiology sometimes, or vice versa. I think it's more vice versa with yoga, but we'll go with it. So feel that left arm. Yeah, get into this arm feeling like it's lengthening, it's reaching the left arm over that right leg, open, breathe. If you're on the block, you can still do that exact work. It just takes a different feeling in your hip. And now unwind. And this time we'll take our Baddha Konasana, feet closer. Take your sand aside and hold on like you're scooping up your feet. Right, I always find this one is good old school. Hold on to your feet, bring your elbows down and lean forward. Now the inside of the feet is opening out, so I'm not trying to smush my feet together whatsoever, but I do want to use the elbows to press and to feel the core reach front. Okay, now with the L-bones having that direction of moving down, like they're kind of plates, they're bones. The arms are the bones pushing as well. And then as you flow the heart forward, and then if the knees kind of perk up, they kind of scoop up and the muscles grip in the inner thighs, I want you to bring your hands so they're actually at the inner thighs. And then you're pressing that outwards and back to rotate the thighs open versus letting them keep pushing up. So try to get the hands on the thighs and feel that rotation back so the palms are turning down into the actual thigh. Like I'm trying to get that inner thigh to stretch and the hands to press. And my feet can scoot out if it's uncomfortable, my legs or my knees. And then feel the ribs forward and up. So centering for a couple moments here. Breathe. Exhale, relax your core. And then as you bring your knees to point up, you're going to pivot a little bit and take one of your blankets off. And you're going to bring your knees to point up, like I mentioned, and make sure there's nothing in front of your feet right now. Scoot your feet forward, scoot your pelvis so you're at the very edge of your bolster. And then you're going to lower on back and swing your feet up. Yeah, Viparita Karani. Maybe knowing what you're doing is better than just guiding back with trust. Okay, so with the back of the pelvis weighted and the legs lightly apart, like notice where you can lightly separate the two-leg path up into the feet, and then flex your feet. Now these are all ideas. You might find that some of them are useful and some you'll create your own directions. So as I bend the knees, I'm going to actually get my sand and place that to the soles of my feet as I push my feet up. Okay, so get the feet balancing your sand. If you're sandless, that's okay, right? You can use a bag of rice. You don't have to use sand. Some people put a belt across their feet instead and then hold the belt with both hands and have a little resistance. But the sand is resistance, right? It's resistance and it encourages that flush of the lymph nodes. But here I do notice when I have my sand, my knees will go a little closer in. So this is going to make it a little more work for me to kind of feel my back of my pelvis, tailbone pressing into my bolster. So think of the tailbone as an access point for the thighs and also really the hips. So if we're going to get into our hips, we might sense this is a good starting point for our back work. And as the arms flow open, if they're in cactus or they're straight out to the sides, they're both good. Both are good. Find what is the most easeful for your arms. And mentally visualize that the knees are separating enough that you can feel your feet flexing and the back of the legs extending. You know, the final awareness that we will mark today for this position really will be the arch of the spine. I sense when I'm in this and I have the direction tailbone pressing, it kind of puts almost a block in that space for a few moments afterwards, like I'm focusing on that definition. So after that fact, feel where you can naturally flow from the back of the pelvis to the front, the belly central, and feel that natural flow of the arch because you're up on your bolster, so you're going to create a back bend immediately in your lumbar curve. and find the satisfaction of that repetitive breath. Brings you into a little more natural, comfortable arch. And the knees generally separate a lot easier that way. It's not a massive separation you've been looking for, but it's not a struggle around the knee joint. And we want to keep building that circulation around the knees in the right way. So a few more here. Your legs might be kind of wandering a little bit, shifting front and back or side to side. Eventually try to arrive at a still point. Kind of a meditative leg position. They're still. They have subtleties of movement inside kind of the wave of awareness, but it always comes back to that center. Inhaling, belly full. Out breath, belly relaxes towards the spine. Good. Now, as we bend our knees, giving ourselves the time to shift our knees to bending, and then to assist removing the sand, either by moving it overhead by a drop off, make sure your hands are not overhead, or moving the sand with your hands. You're going to feel the knees as they kind of huddle in together in this easeful knees towards chest. And it's not interrupting the chest so much because you have this bolster. It might shove the legs into your chest a tiny bit. So bring the knees to point a little closer up towards the sky, and then take a block, and let's do a couple simple hamstring patterns. It's going to be with just the block, so it's a little easier to get through. But you're going to lower your right leg straight down and take the block to the back of your left leg, upper back of the leg, and hold that block so it's in its first setting, so it's flat, right? Well, I guess it'd be flat no matter what setting it would be against your leg, but it's easier to grab a hold of. If you're longer armed, I suppose turning it the other direction might be worthwhile. But it is a wider surface that's touching your leg if it's in this flat position. So holding, and then the top of that right thigh is relaxing, so to speak, as much as it could. The legs might be squirming for relief soon, but working with the left foot circling. That's the key, is get the left foot to move. Both directions, in and out circling. Whether that makes sense or not. Going around and around. And then find a still point with the foot. Okay, now when you slide your right foot in, can you keep the foot on the ground on that right side? And then when you change out the legs, you're going to bring the block to your belly, your left foot comes down. It's simply practicing that pause, and then lift up the right foot, feel the knee point in, and then bring the block to the back of the leg and lift up through that right. Actually, don't focus so much maybe on the efforting, but that the block is behind your right leg. And you're just holding on to it, and you're trying to negotiate kind of a little palpation in the back of the right leg to stimulate the hamstring. And I don't know if you identify with the back of your leg as it having like a string compilation from the sitting bone to your heel bone, but it's an interesting idea. Somebody made that word. That you're working on the borders outside of that string, right, the hamstring, and you're focusing on a complete pressure with the block. So find your tight spot on the hamstring and keep the block there, and just let it be pushed in by your hands, your elbows bending. in this final spinal part of the session today, I want you to try to let the body just slow and focus. Be very simple sequencing, but each of them has a opportunity to really balance internally, slow guidance of breath. Circle the right foot. Almost forgot, but didn't. Go both directions. Changing things up. Okay, now when you get that feel of your left leg either straight, most of you probably straighten it out. I find that's a little limiting for me right now. But you decide if your left leg is straight or it's bending. It's completely up to you. Your focus is the hamstring on the right leg, but this left leg does have something to say with the opposing reach of the leg. Now, as I slide the left foot in and push down to my foot, I'm going to move the block away, but this time as both knees draw up, I'm going to bring the knees to the chest and then push the bolster a little bit away. Now, a little bit is probably not enough. You got to push it until it's near your rear and then a little forward. So I'm going to push the bolster enough in front that my palms could be on the floor and the bolster still in front of my fingers away. Put the feet to the bolster and then feel the activity level in your glute muscles, your rear, just by pushing down into your feet, just that pure fact. Now, as you lift up your hips and you start to extend the front of the thighs, move the blanket away from under your head. I don't know if you feel like you've got to have your blanket. I know you're going to have sand around behind you, so just kind of notice if you can't move it back, that's why. And then bring your arms overhead. So stretch up the hips, draw a bridge. You want to make this feel like it's a little bit of an inversion. So if I move my blanket away and I have my feet on my bolster, when I lift up my hips and bring the arms overhead, I psychologically in my brain, it feels like I'm a little bit upside down. So just noticing that perspective. Now, of course, since you're in your home practice, you can do the pose probably even more freely. You might decide you don't want to move your arms. You might be taking a nap. You might have your feet on the floor, not the bolster instead. So explore if that's of interest to you and feel the alternating lift and lower of the spine. But really get the spine to move, right? To lift up all the way to the shoulder blades. And then when you round your back and you lower down this time, I want you to try to let the hands be down besides the hips. The legs don't have a block between them. You're defining this on your own terms. And then when you do lift your hips up this next time, notice the draw into your back with the bolster. Just notice this is a 75% of your maximum hip lift. And then let the weight of the spine lower down all the way to the back of the pelvis. And then push the bolster with your feet over to the right side of your mat. You know, if you've got some debris in the way, you might move a little bit aside, but come back to that bridge pose for a moment. Feel if you're close enough to your heels with your fingers, so you are in a defined bridge pose, and then get the hips to lift into that bridge. And do you feel your quads more in this pose than with the bolster? Just notice. The knees might find a little bit more kind of a chunky pressure on the knee when the bolster's gone. But you can work with that, lifting your thighs. It's all energy on this one. A lot of energy to get your hips up. Now lift up your heels. If you're on the floor with your feet, lower your spine down. And then right leg sweeps down for sure on this one. Left leg crosses over the bolster and add sand to the exterior. Add a blanket under your head. And the sand is going to go on the outer left thigh. If the blanket on the bolster will be a better idea for your leg height, let's say your leg doesn't touch the bolster, put something on top of the bolster so it's a little bit more accessible for you. Keep in the awareness that accessibility is crucial for your yoga poses to be successful, that you feel that you're able to access the actual definition of the pose. So I've got the left leg crossed over the bolster, hip freshening, and then span the left arm open. I imagine some of you would be most pleased if we had kind of a completion cycle that was a little more defined, maybe, less active in and out poses at the end, and then just really flush out the circulation on the hip, the back of the waist. So the farther my left leg goes to the right, I actually feel, if I scoot my bolster a little bit out, it challenges me a little bit. The right leg can stay straight-ish. I'm over on the right hip a bit. The most essential part that it'd be good for everybody to really emphasize is that your back, even your back of your left arm and shoulder are on the floor. You're not rolled to the right hip all the way, so your arm is open. Right hand can be anywhere. It could be resting on your hip, could be resting on your belly, your ribs, or for once it doesn't have any assignment. Breathing full, empty completely. And now as you work your way towards the left arm moving back to help guide your sand away, I want you to take a reclining pigeon pose. So you're going to roll into your back a little bit more this way, and then tuck that left foot to the right knee and hold the back of the right thigh and pull. If you want a little more definition, you hold below the right knee, but it's okay either way. You do not have to hold below the knee. Essentially, you're sealing, then opening up through the back of the pelvis across to the left hip. Pull, use your arms, try to let them hold the legs towards you. Now keep that intensity for the next few moments. Now knowing that you can pull in maybe a little bit more. And then you pause. And then lower down the right foot. And as you uncross, I think a very subtle windshield wiper is good. Because you're going to be moving your bolster. Some of you might kick your bolster to the left side. Some might grab a hold of it and kind of drop it over. But a little mild windshield wiper. So you feel this kind of tussling at the back of the not the pelvis as much as the buttocks, right? You kind of feel those rock a little bit side to side. And as you take the next side, the left leg is straight-ish, the right leg is over-ish. Each time I do the practice, I go, oh, I forgot the ball on this side. So, there's always something to remember, isn't there? Okay, sand on the outer right thigh. If you like, you don't have to have sand at all. Proportionally try to find that sand so it's pretty evened out. Give some time to really move it around a little bit. Now, when that crossover occurs, you can always use that ball if you have one. Maybe you don't want to add it on the second side, or you did it on the first side anyway. It was automatic. But when your head turns to the right, feel this open quality for the right arm, the chest. I suppose one side you'll feel more than the other, perhaps in your chest or your hip or vice versa. So, sometimes my hewing changes because of the sensation I'm actually feeling when I do the shape is more prominent on one side. So when you come in, feel the crossover layer in your thigh. Feel how that lifts up out of the right hip. And relax the face, softening the skin. The repetition of breath is in the body, not so much stuck in the face. So with these moments here, wade into that left hip. Now, if you have the ball, you're going to move that aside. Secondary, you'll move the sand. If you feel like you need to be in the shape a little bit longer, please stay. And then those that are ready to come out with the sand idea, you're going to feel that right leg reach to the left. So that's good to keep that connection of the outer exterior hip and thigh. And then what might be good for you is to pull that knee up towards you now, and then roll onto your back and hook the right foot to the left leg, and then hold the back of the left leg. So it does you could really make these choreographically quite intertwined. So there's not a lot of kind of breaking points between poses. Yeah, that's a challenge with some yoga styles, right? Some have a lot of, not a lot of kind of streaming from one to the next. It kind of has stop and go. So just notice what works for you. Flex the right foot, that's important. The left foot is relaxed, the right foot is active. It's going to protect your ankle joint more than anything, and the knee. So you want to think about these as being places you want to create some strength in the fibers of the ankle and the knee. Doesn't hurt. And then with that stillness, movement is helpful. We're going to rock a little side to side and mentally visualize what your final pose might be in the session. Maybe you want to bring your legs up the wall and have a bolster under your pelvis. Maybe you're going to do a bolster bench, which I will show. And maybe you're doing a chair shoulder stand. So it's up to you. So you're going to uncross and you're going to hold the back of the legs and roll up. For those of us coming to either of those shapes, have to get up at some point. And then as you take bolster bench option, visualized or watching, you're going to put your blocks up on that highest height and the bolster is on top. Now keep in mind, we are getting a little bit high up with that. So a blanket on top of the bolster, and then what is going to be right under your legs are the blocks. So when you come back, you're going to have your legs on the bolster, right on top of where the blocks are for balance. And then when you lower down, be sure that the heels are floating. I don't think they can do much else. They can't touch the floor here. And if you're not liking the balance and it's getting worrisome for you because it feels rocky, then put the blocks down one notch. You have to get up and move them down, or just start with them at the second setting. And then placing your arms to rest either on the belly, besides your hips, stretching a little bit out, distant from the body, and come into a few cycles of slowing down even more the rate of pushing into and out of the heart, relaxing your heart. If you have sand on your ribs or your sand anywhere in the core, that might feel grounding. But let the back of the pelvis feel like it has some balance for the spine. So from the pelvis to your spinal column to the neck, resting your head, nodding your head side to side. Feel the ritual of breathing into the core of the body, belly full. And resting the diaphragm back and up towards the heart. Allow some peace to flow into your mind and body from the practice. And once you notice the body has some symmetry, some evenness on both sides from this position, after all those poses we've completed, that your hands start to move themselves to the body sides or on it. And as your hands come together, interlace your fingers and turn your palms to the ceiling and back. Just like we started, but on our backs here. Resting the face. And then as you separate your hands, you're going to move any sand away, and then you'll bring your, if it's on your body, and then bring your knees gently to your chest and let your hands guide you simply to one side, and use the arms and the hands to move you up to sitting. Take a brief sitting shape to collectively branch in our focus together. And then with that idea that mentioned of breathing in that peace into the body and visualizing that as well, let your hands lift up, balance them in front of your heart. Feel that pressure of the palms and relaxation of the brain stem bowing into your heart. Inhaling together, breathing in wellness, and with an exhalation, bowing into your heart.